Welcome to the Through These Gates podcast, the most rational Nebraska football show on the internet. I am your host, Caleb Salvatore, and we're back. If you listen to the Crooks and Books sports betting podcast this morning, I teased that we were bringing the show back, and here we are. I'm a man of my word. Full disclosure, 2020, we had people coming around in 2024 asking where we were, and to be honest with you, life was just too much for the last year. I had way too much stuff going on that I won't even get into the personal details of. I got married and bought a house within a year, and then we had a whole bunch of other stuff going on. It was just too much for me to do this show, but I am back in action, and we're going to do it the whole year. That is my word. So, excuse me. I waited to do this show, probably a little bit longer than I should have, but it's fine. I decided to give it a week because I wanted to watch the game again and let it marinate. Because I don't know about you, when I watch the games, the first time around, you guys probably aren't psychopaths, so you don't watch it a second time. But the first time I watch the game, it's very emotional for me, and I'm not thinking clearly when I'm watching it. So I decided to run it back a second time and then let my thoughts really sit with me on this Cincinnati game, and I'll give you some predictions for where I think the season's going to go over the next 11 games. Hopefully more than 11 games, but we'll have to wait and see. But I'll let you know where I think the season's going to go after that, and then we'll break it down a little bit further. So here's what I'll say. The first thing, somebody asked me before the game, they said, how do you think this game's going to go? And I said, do you want my honest opinion? We should go out there and beat the brakes off of them, but I think it's going to be one of those games where it's just the perfect storm. You can call it whatever you want. It wasn't a home game. It just felt kind of weird. It's on a Thursday night. It's an opener against a team that's above opener quality, if you know what I mean. We always have some rust when we start these games, and unfortunately, we had a difficult matchup. But fortunately, this time, we walked away victorious, and we'll get into that in a minute. I think it left us more questions than answers, though. And that was my prediction. I said, I think we're going to walk away going, well, we won, but what the hell did I just watch? And that's exactly what happened. So this is that's the problem with playing a game like this, is I don't think that this is a good gauge of where the season's going to go either way. I don't think it's a sign that we're playoff contenders, and I also don't think it's a sign that you might want to focus on the lawn this fall, right? Because like I said, Cincinnati is a higher quality week one opponent than what we're used to, than what most Power 5 teams play. Cincinnati's usually who you face week 2 or 3. You want to play somebody like UTEP or Akron or Roast Beef State in that week 1 game. Now, had they played Akron first and gotten some of those preseason jitters out, gotten some of that week 1 rust off of Dylan and off of the offense and off of the defense, figured out some of their scheme and how their players fit in, because you really don't know until it's a live game, I feel like we would have beat Cincinnati by a couple of scores. That's just my opinion. I feel like we beat Cincinnati by a couple of scores if we got to play some cupcake team first and work out the kinks. Because the reality is, it's like driving, right? When you're driving 25 miles an hour down the road, first off, I'm the person behind you in the fast lane laying in my horn. Get the fuck out. Get out of the way. You hire an Uber if you're going to drive that slow. But if you're driving 25 miles an hour down the road and the person in front of you that's 2 car lengths ahead of you slams on their brakes, your room for error is pretty high there. You got a pretty wide room for error, margin of error there, where you can hit the brakes or swerve and make all kinds of adjustments to avoid not rear-ending that person. Now, if you're going 80 miles an hour down the highway and somebody at 2 car lengths ahead of you slams on their brakes, the room for error is a lot less there. That's the difference in playing somebody like Akron versus somebody like Cincinnati. Of course, dude, look around at the Big Ten. Everybody looked a little weird. I think New Mexico gave Michigan more of a run than they were comfortable for. Michigan State, Western Michigan, Iowa and Albany. Everybody just looked a little weird. I mean, a year ago, Oregon got run for their money by Idaho. You know, you had a couple years ago, you had Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois and then go on to play in the championship. I don't define teams by week one. There's a whole bunch of things going on there. And it's like I said, just that preseason rust that needs to be shaken off. So I feel like if we would have played a lesser opponent first, this game probably wouldn't have been as close. Now, with that said, I don't want to take anything away from Cincinnati. I actually think Cincinnati's going to have a decent team this year. I don't think it's going to be that team that was in the college football playoff a couple of years ago, but I do think they're going to have a decent team. You've got 2 Power 5 foot caliber running backs there. Both of those guys can eat up carries and hit the hole quickly. I mean, those guys were both quality running backs. Both of them have received meaningful snaps at quality Big Ten programs, Wisconsin and Ohio State respectively. So it's not like this is some scrub team that came out and ran all over us. Now, I do have some concerns with our defensive line that we'll get into a little bit later. But that wasn't some garbage team. Now, if Akron comes out this Saturday and puts up similar numbers in the run game, that's a different story. The other thing is you've got a quarterback that extends the play as well as anybody I've seen. Can you name 3 quarterbacks who are more athletic than him that we're going to face the rest of the year than what we saw at Cincinnati in week 1? Because I can't. I don't think we're going to face an athletic freak like that maybe twice this year outside of that Cincinnati game. So you've got a kind of an outlier X-factor quarterback. They had bad receivers, but they got an all-pro caliber defensive tackle who Nebraska, as the game went on, started to wear him down. So I think Cincinnati's actually got the tools to win 8 or 9 games in the Big 12 this year. I hope to God they beat the hell out of UCF. So I don't think we faced a bad team. I think what it seemed like to me, and if you looked at the way Nebraska ran their offense and their defense, was that we thought we could get away with a pretty vanilla game plan on both sides. It seemed like they stayed in their base defense quite a bit. And then offense, they didn't try to take the top off the defense even once. Offense was all simple run plays and underneath dump-off passes. And to be totally honest with you, it worked. It was a winning strategy. I think Nebraska thought we can get away with running a super vanilla, basic bitch, down to the bones offense and win against Cincinnati because our talent level is that much higher. Now, it almost backfired, but it worked. This is not the Dana Holgorsen that we know from West Virginia. If there wasn't a track record with Holgorsen, if this were somebody like Satterfield as our OC, I'd be like, oh, great, here we go again. But it's not. Holgorsen's got the reputation of having quite a few cards up his sleeve. And I think they intentionally didn't show those cards Thursday night because I think that at the end of the day, like I said, they figured they could overwhelm Cincinnati with their talent, and they did. If they would have busted out all the stops, yeah, they probably could have won by more points, but they also, it just felt like we were pacing ourselves. Like, hey, we'll take a nail-biter against Cincinnati if it means Michigan doesn't get a whole bunch of film for us. Because that's what it feels like. Because if they can win with a vanilla game plan against Cincinnati, they can go win with super vanilla game plans against Houston Christian and Akron these next 2 weeks. So that's what it feels like to me, is they were just like, let's not give Michigan anything to work with. Let's save all of the cards up our sleeves for that game. That's what I hope it was. Also, what's up with all the Dylan Raiola hate? Look at these numbers. 23 out of 42, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Did he have a pass that should have been a pick 6? Yes, but so does everyone. They didn't capitalize on it. It doesn't matter. You look at those stats, they're decent. 80% completion rate percentage. No, it's not going to win him the Heisman Trophy, but that's not what we want from him in his sophomore year. We want to see noticeable growth. And I think he did a great job at checking down. I'll tell you what. If the kid is nothing else, he's the most accurate passer we've had probably in my lifetime. And it's not even close. He was on the money. He didn't make any costly mistakes. And that was that. He did do my big critique of him, which is he fumbled while taking a sack, but he got the ball back. So it's not even like it is what it is. So I think Raiola had a fine game. It's not eye-popping. It's all underneath, and that's the big the criticism of him. But how are you going to hold against a guy the fact that he ran the plays that were called for him? He's not the one calling the plays. Holgorsen clearly had a game plan, which was to keep things conservative and not show their hand with a bunch of film and not try to take the top off the defense unless they absolutely had to. And Raiola ran that game plan pretty damn efficiently. He was in game manager mode. Hey, we don't need you to play hero ball to beat Cincinnati. If we do, we're in trouble this season. We need you to not lose us the game. And that's what he did, which, to be quite honest, the last couple of seasons of Nebraska football, what we've been missing is a quarterback who just doesn't lose us the game. We don't need you to come out and look like prime Peyton Manning. We don't need you to put up Heisman Trophy numbers. We're an 8-9 win team a couple of years in the Frost era and Matt Rhule's first year, honestly, if we just have a quarterback who doesn't cost us the game. Raiola was that way in the first half of the season. The wheels kind of fell off last year, but I think he can recapture some of his mojo, and this is a positive step, was having a relatively clean game like you saw here against Cincinnati. And one more thing about Cincinnati not being as bad as everyone thinks. I understand they had a rough end of the season last year. You got it. That team started off 5-1, and they had some injuries and they had some locker room issues, and the wheels kind of fell off of it. But that Cincinnati team last year was better than their record. If we would have faced them in the first half of last year, they probably would have given us a run for our money again. So I don't like the hate on Cincinnati, not just because one of my friends went there, but I don't like the Cincinnati hate. I think the defense has a lot of question marks. The defense is where your question marks are at. Everyone's talking about how our offense sucks. They clearly just wanted a conservative game plan that didn't show any film. So I'm not pressing the panic button on the offense. The defense, on the other hand, has some question marks. Let me read you these stats off. They gave up 17 points, 3 out of 10 on third down, and 270 yards. If you look at those numbers at the surface level, those are good numbers. You're looking at that going, why is everyone so concerned about the defense? Why is everyone running around like Chicken Little with their head cut off, screaming the sky is falling because we had a game where we gave up 30% on third down, under 20 points, and under 300 yards against a Big 12 team where they don't play a lot of defense and they put up stupid numbers? Why are we freaking out about that? The reason was because if that's your consistent play across a whole game, that's really good. The problem was there were times where the defense looked dominant, and there were times where they looked like they had no idea what the hell they were doing, specifically those last couple of drives. Now, Malcolm Hartzog, all the credit to him, that guy is the scapegoat of Nebraska football fans, and I don't really understand why. He gets put in a lot of bad positions because they haven't had other people to play the roles, right? Now they finally got people that can play these outside cornerback roles, and they can put Malcolm Hartzog where he's a more natural fit. So I don't understand the hate on him. You had key breakdowns, and they got chunks of this yardage and points and third down conversions in very key moments, and that's what was so frustrating. John Butler has evidently never heard of a spy. Never heard of a spy. How many times does a guy have to cook you before you go, you know what? We're going to take him out. We're going to take him out of the game. I think his game plan must have been something along the lines of, we're just going to let Sorsby beat us with his feet because we don't think he can. We're going to force him to beat us with his feet because we don't think he can. That's a gamble. And again, just like what Holgorsen did, that gamble almost bit us in the ass. Now we got, I don't want to say lucky because that was a hell of an interception there, but we came very, very close to that gamble killing us as well. So the defense is and I knew this game was going to be a little bit closer than a lot of people were projecting when I was watching the On3 Sports pregame preview of it. And I'm watching these pundits, and they come out and they say, what are the team's biggest strengths, and why do you think they're going to win? And I don't remember who it was, but one of them said Cincinnati has a very strong rushing attack on their offense. And that's a concern But thankfully, Nebraska had one of the best rushing defenses in the country last year. Well, they had one of the best rushing defenses in the country last year before they lost their entire defensive line, whether it was to the NFL draft or the portal. So I went, this might be closer than these guys are thinking because they clearly haven't done their homework. They're talking about last year's stats, which were good, but none of those guys returned. So there were some questions there. The secondary is the strength of the whole team, not just the defense. So all the props to the secondary. We'll see how they do when they get up against some real receivers in the Big Ten. But I don't think I've seen a Nebraska secondary look as good as it did last Thursday in over a decade. I mean, that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. You had a non-existent pass rush. I don't know if, again, that was part of the game plan, that we're going to try to contain this guy and not let him beat us on the edges. I don't know what it was, but they could not get to the quarterback to save their lives. There's a lot of question marks there. Any other notes that I have on this here? Let's see. Special teams. Special teams didn't cost us. See what happens when you have competent special teams? You have a kicker who can actually make it from further out than 35 yards, and a punter who doesn't shank the ball over the back of his head, Charlie Brown style. Do you see what happens? Mike Eckler's played a massive role in that. Do you see what happens when you actually try to be good at special teams? When you actually invest in your special teams, you're special, the good kind of special, on special teams. That's exactly what you saw there. Last one. And this kind of plays into going ahead against Akron. Boy, oh boy, do we need to find an RB2. Listen, Emmett Johnson, again, one of those games that didn't pop out at you. It was just an efficient, really blue-collar game. 25 carries, 108 yards, no touchdowns, 4.3 yards per carry. Doesn't stick out at you, but it was efficient. My problem with this is week one. Emmett Johnson does not have the body type to be a running back that can carry the ball 25 times a game and play an entire season. You absolutely have to find someone else who can back him up. Even running backs who do have the body type to take 25 carries a game rarely finish an entire season without some type of injury or missing at least one or two games. So with Emmett Johnson, what I'm going to be looking forward to these next couple of weeks against Akron and Houston Christian is them trying to let that 2, 3, and 4 spots on the depth chart for running backs start to take place. Because Big Ten season with as big of of nasty a defensive lines and linebackers as we're going to deal with this year, Emmett's going to take some hits. He's going to need some breaks. It is not sustainable for him to take those carries. I know they tried for Charmar Brown in the offseason. It didn't really work out. I don't know if he would have been the answer anyways, but they gave that the old college try. I just don't, like, I don't know. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Quentin Ives, if it's Mekhi Nelson, if it's Isaiah Mosey. One of those guys needs to get some serious carries going into these games against Akron and Houston Christian. I think that is vital, not just so we can develop a backup running back and kind of figure out where the depth chart is there, but also because I think it's going to be important for Emmett to be able to rest his body over those next two games before we go into a nasty one against Michigan. Michigan's going to have our number. That defensive line's going to be rearing to go. They're going to say, all right, they're going to key on Emmett Johnson. I'm telling you right now. And we'll find out if Dylan Raiola possesses the talent to push us over the line there. But that's probably the most pivotal point of the season right now, is we've got the offensive line is what it is. I hope they'll start to gel and play a little bit better. I think their push got a whole lot better in the second half. I don't know how much of that had to do with Cincinnati's lack of depth and the fact Nebraska was playing like 9 or 10 guys, and how much of that had to do with the fact that those guys are still learning to play together. That's part of the problem when you get an offensive line and 2 out of your 5 key players are transfers. Elijah Pritchett, jury's still out. Supposedly he had the best PFF blocking grade out there, right? I think We'll see. Boneheaded false start cost us 4 points in the end zone. And then you've got that horrible sack he gave up at the end of the game. Very, very, which was kind of the knock we had on Pritchett when we got him, which was like that you knew Pritchett, he was going to be a solid blocker throughout most of the game with a couple of key mistakes. So he hasn't learned from that, is what it appears to me. We still don't have that clutch gene in Emmett Pritchett. Elijah Pritchett. All right, position grades. Quarterback, we'll give Dylan Raiola a B. A B. He had a good game. He had something that should have been a pick six, but it wasn't, so we can't hold it against him. He didn't do anything to wow me. He played to the plays that were called for him. B. Running backs, C+. Emmett Johnson had a fine game. It wasn't a great game. It wasn't a bad game. It was a respectable effort. Nobody else behind him did anything. C+ for the running backs. Wide receivers, I'll tell you what, that and Isaiah Hunter kid looks like a player. I think I'm going to give the receivers, I'm going to cop out on this. I'm going to give the receivers an incomplete because, like I said, I just don't feel like they called a game, and this was by design, that would set the receivers up to put up stupid numbers. I'm going to say receivers incomplete. Tight ends, B-. I thought Lindenmeyer, who's, by the way, built like an old school fullback, not a tight end. I thought Lindenmeyer looked good. I thought he looked efficient. He had some great plays down there. Should have scored on that pitch out from Raiola, but whatever the case may be. I thought Harburg looked like a liability in terms of blocking, and then I'd like to see Carter Nelson get back. We'll see what he can do. Offensive line, B-. Like I said, they started to very, very slow start. Could not get a push. I said less push than a woman having a miscarriage. I know it's offensive. We tell dark jokes on this show sometimes. They proved me wrong in the second half. We're going to grade on half by half. I'd give them about a D+, C- in the first half. In the second half, you're looking at about a B+. They did a good job other than Pritchett's sack. Defensive line, boy, oh boy, F. That was bad. There ain't no defending that. They had no push. They got gashed play after play after play in the run game, and then they had no passing game, which is props to the secondary that we'll get into later on. F for the defensive line. They got nobody in the middle. That's going to be an area of concern all year. Whether it was Judy, whether it was Van Poppel, it didn't matter. Whoever was in the middle was gashed play after play after play after play. That's going to be a serious problem for them throughout the season, especially as we start to play some more run-heavy teams in the Big Ten. Linebackers, I'd give a C+. I think Vincent Shavers looked really good. That's what everyone's talking about. Oh, Cincinnati beat themselves. They fumbled. No, that guy did not fumble right before the end of the first half there. Vincent Shavers ripped the ball out of his hands. That was a fantastic play. I think everybody else just looked mediocre, though. I was not very impressed with Marcus Watson-Trent. Everyone hyped this guy up as, he was going to be the next big thing. He was going to lead the team in tackles, and yeah, he looked fine. They didn't look terrible, but I wasn't overly impressed with the linebackers. Secondary, A+, dude. A+ on the secondary. Like I said, best, and maybe Cincinnati just has garbage receivers. That's the best performance I've seen out of a Nebraska secondary in I don't know how long. Start to finish, they look fantastic. Guy threw 25 passes, threw less than 70 yards. No touchdowns and a pick. 50%, just over 50% completion rating percentage. Fantastic job by the secondary. Special teams, A for special teams. The only reason I don't give it an A+ is because the kick return game was a little mediocre. So I'll give it an A- because that's a big part of it. But coverage looked fine. You got a punter who kicked the ball, 4 times, and 3 out of the 4 he pinned him inside the 20. The average didn't look too good, but you got to consider where he was punting from was usually on their side of the field. So he did a great job. And then Kyle Kananen. 2 out of 2 with a long of 52. Didn't miss any extra points. Didn't do anything to cost us the game. In fact, one could argue we don't win without Kyle Kananen. If we have last year's kicking game, we're probably having a different tone on this show, and I probably would have recorded it the night after the game happened. Looking ahead to Akron, I think we're going to win. I think 38-13, Nebraska. Again, I think they're going to try to intentionally keep the game plan a little vanilla. They're going to work on establishing these backup running backs and a little bit of depth along the offensive line. So there's going to be some hiccups. It won't be pretty, but these are the types of teams that you want to have the hiccups against. These are the teams you want to get these struggles out of the way with, like Akron and like Houston Christian, so that when you go to face Michigan, you've gotten all the kinks out of your offense and your defense in this case. I think 38-13 is a good score. I think we might see a little bit more scheme in the defensive game. I think Raiola is, again, going to be pretty limited in terms of what he can do. There's going to be an emphasis on guys not named Emmett Johnson getting the ball. So 38-13, you heard it here. This is not a betting channel. Do not take my advice and go put the mortgage on it. Akron looks pretty bad, though. I'm not going to lie. 38-13, that's my prediction, but I would still be kind of disappointed if that happens. We should lay at least 50 on them, and we should hold them to under 10 points. They lost 10-0, whitewashed by Wyoming. So there's that. Anyway, that has been our show. We will see you after the Akron game. Nuke, Iowa. Thank you.